Hello and welcome back to the Transracial Adoption Positive or Negative podcast. My name is Xinru Viola and this is my co-host, my mother.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth and today we're going to be talking about my trip to Hefei in China to adopt Xinru many years ago now.
So we ended the last episode on Mum's got the documents, she has accepted me as the child she would like to adopt and she's getting prepared to go to China. So
yep.
What happened then?
I wanted to take someone with me. First of all, my friend Francis was going to come, and then because of the timing, it got delayed into the next leave year. It became impossible to do it, really. And then my sister, she very kindly decided she would come with me at the last minute, really. So, of course, I packed clothes. All the clothes I had for you, except for one dress, were second-hand clothes that various friends had given me, because it was obviously going to be difficult financially. The whole thing was going to be difficult financially. So I had lots of clothes from all my friends who tended to have slightly older children. So I was very lucky. And all the equipment, I was given all the equipment, all the toys, everything really. And so I packed the stuff.
Benefit of being an older parent then.
Yeah, definitely. But most other adopters, buy all this stuff. For neither of you did I buy anything really. Virtually nothing. So we flew standby, which is a bit nerve-wracking because, as you know, with staff standby flights, there's always a chance you won't get on. So we went I think we went a day early or something just to overcome that. But it looked good and we got on. And so we met our guide in Beijing and then flew on to Hefei in Anhui province.
Oh, yeah, so just tell me about that then. You say you met your guide. What is a guide?
Most people, when they're doing a foreign adoption, would use some known local expert who specialises in those sorts of trips. You need someone who speaks the language, who knows their way around, to do the contact with the Social Welfare Institute, that's the children's home, to get the arrangements in place for adopting the child. You really, even if you speak Chinese, you can't really do it yourself. You need someone who knows their way around it. On these trips, most people let the guide arrange the whole thing, the local flights, all the outings, all the hotels and so on, which subsequently on later trips, of course, we didn't do. But for those trips, they arranged everything almost as if you were sort of like a tourist or something. And arranged for the handover of the money because there's a fee that you give for the child's previous care, quite a large fee. Yeah, so I used the same one that everyone else was using. And I must say, he was pretty efficient, but on the second trip, used him the second time as well. I did feel less happy about him on the second trip, and I'll go into that when we get to that. But yeah, he was okay.
And how did you communicate? Because I'm assuming back then there was there email?
Yes.
Oh, there was.
There was only email, there was nothing else.
Okay.
We
Telephone?
did email. Not really.
Not really.
I mean, what obviously existed, but it was no good. His English was okay, not brilliant, but okay. He certainly knew what he was doing. He had contacts everywhere. He sort of traded off that really to make quite a lot of money out of this whole business. But yeah, he got the job done. So we flew to Hefei. We had one night in a hotel there. And then the next morning, a guide came, very nice man actually, to take us for the adoption. And unusually, there was no one else being adopted at the same time. On most other trips that you hear about, there'll be a group who probably haven't known each other previously, but there's a group adoption. Anyway, in the hotel there was an enormous group, well, I say enormous, about 20 families.
Wow,
American,
that is big.
From the USA. They're going around on a coach, not in a taxi, on a coach. And I just saw them when we arrived, the first day, all arriving back on this coach. And at every window there was a white adult and a little Chinese child staring out. Yeah, and I chatted to one woman and she was absolutely delightful. And she said, don't worry, the children are all really healthy and it's all very smooth and don't worry. And so she was just really, really nice. But I think they left the next morning, which was the morning when I was going to adopt you. So I didn't see them again. But there was a large group there, but they were nothing to do with us and with a different guide. But Americans were adopting really large numbers of children. And again, interestingly, it has been commented, they almost always got younger children. Who knows what was going on? Americans generally got younger children. So I was offered a child who was over a year old, but like most people, I'd asked for as young as possible. The Americans often got, some people got children of 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah, we know our friend was actually adopted at 3 months.
That's
from
amazing.
America. Yeah.
3 months.
She was 3 months.
My God. I don't know anyone in England who got one that young, anywhere near that young. So that's an interesting point. So we were taken off to, I think it was the notary office, to meet the child and go through the procedure. I'm trying to remember it really, all these years ago. And I just remember to get to the office, we walked through this Chinese street market, and it had loudspeakers playing the music, which was very current at the time, from Titanic. That's why I always say I associate you with the theme music from Titanic. So there we were in the middle of China. There was nothing that struck me as either English or European anywhere, really. Everything was entirely Chinese, but the music being blasted out in this street market was Western. So I thought that was interesting. And then we went, through this market, up these stairs. And as we were walking up the stairs, the guide, who I think was just trying to encourage me and make me feel good, said, "I think I can hear your daughter. There's a baby crying. I think I can hear your daughter." And I just felt, I don't know whether you can understand, I felt terribly embarrassed at someone saying your daughter. No one had ever said that to me. And it just seemed unreal and odd. And in fact, it can't have been you because you were asleep. So whatever that baby was that he thought he'd heard, it wasn't you because you'd been asleep for a while. So we got in there, so there was a woman from the children's home with a sleeping baby, which was you. The guide was just translating everything, but the proceedings went ahead in Chinese. And I was a nervous wreck. Vivian was there with my video camera, and I kept saying to her, just film the whole thing, don't stop.
Her sister?
Yes, yeah. So we have got a film of it all, and you can now understand some of it, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't know what they were saying, but I thought it would be good to have a film of it. So then you woke up, and I think they handed you over to me just for a minute or two, but then they took you back because technically you belonged to them, not to me, until the procedure had gone through. So they took you back. And on the film, you can see you sitting on the woman's lap on the other side, and I was over here. And when I've looked at the film more recently, I noticed, which I didn't at the time because I was just completely out to lunch, that the woman was pointing me out to you and saying, "Mama, Mama," in Chinese to you. You can see it on the film. Have you noticed that?
I think so.
She says it 2 or 3 times. And I think that explains why you called me Mama for ages, not Mummy. You called me Mama. And I think it's because that woman had said it to you. Oh, they brought in, Hervé's famous for its beautiful teas, isn't it? They brought in some lovely tea. And I didn't realise you're supposed to wait until the tea leaves go down to the bottom. So I kept getting tea leaves in my mouth, and I was trying to look as I was sipping it. It was awkward. I'm trying to remember if on that occasion, on one occasion, I had to write an essay. It must have been on both occasions, I suppose. You're supposed to write a little essay about why you want to adopt and what you're going to do. I think I must have done on both occasions. I scratched something. I don't think it matters much what you said. I just said whatever came to mind. And then it was all, finalised and signed and sealed. And then they handed you over to me. I'm cutting it all a bit short. So then we went back to the hotel. And I'm trying to think whether we had any sort of meal with them. Because sometimes you do that, but I don't remember that. I think we just went home, back through the market with the modern music on the tannoy.
And how did you feel at this point?
Oh, just so stressed out. Terribly stressed out. On both occasions, when I saw the child, I was immensely relieved. I was just, because I'd worked myself up into such a state on both occasions, thinking I might be handed a disabled child or a child completely different from what I was expecting, and what would I do? And I just was really worried stiff on both occasions.
Is it common for that to happen?
Not uncommon, I don't think. I mean, some women are very positive and think it's all going to be great, but I don't know.
But is it common for you to get a child that doesn't look like the picture of the one you're expecting?
Oh, it can do, yeah. Oh, some people were definitely offered children that, it's horrible to say it, but the orphanage saw an opportunity to get a home for a child they found rather difficult to deal with because of disabilities and things like that. Sometimes they would be swapped, and it's...
Really?
And I'd heard of a case, yes. Someone, a friend of a friend, had heard of a case. And it's not... That's not the only one. There have been others. And, we all say, well, how do you know for sure you get the same child? But I was very relieved that you appeared normal, that you looked straight at me. Again, I'd been to so many medical lectures and things, and, the danger with a child that may have been neglected is that they don't make eye contact, that they're indifferent to being handed over. Now, you didn't seem particularly stressed to be handed over to a new person, but they told us a lot of your background during this whole process, and they said that you had been with a foster family, which I think was probably true because you were very healthy and alert and fine, but that you'd been taken back to the children's home a month earlier in preparation for adoption. And I heard later that that was an instruction given out from Beijing that they were to do that, to take the children back from their foster families for a while before the adopter arrived, because there had allegedly been one incident where foster families got very upset at having to hand the children over. And so we said, oh, take them back, put them in the children's home, and then nobody's going to be upset at the handover. Of course, that is horrifically, potentially upsetting and dangerous, and, you know, it's going to cause insecurity in the child. And it's a really bad thing to do. But that was what they were doing at the time.
So let's talk a bit more about that. What do you mean by that you think it's bad?
Well, because for a baby or a small child, the most important thing is that they get attention, but also that they form an attachment, a real attachment to their caregiver, which would obviously normally be the birth mother or parents, but in the case of a child in care, it should be a key carer or a foster mother, and in your case, you would have got very attached, I'm sure, to your foster mother, whoever she was. And then to take the child away at quite an older age, an age where they're old enough to know what's going on, they're not a tiny, tiny baby, to take them away and put them in an institution, however good, and it was a good one, to break that bond and then not give them straight to the next long-term permanent carer, i.e. me, is really damaging to the psyche of the child. It must have been for you or for all the others. It must have made you feel very insecure, I'm sure. It was a little bit worrying that you didn't seem bothered about being handed over, but I noticed the direct eye contact, I noticed the interest in everything, very, very alert, taking everything in, and that was good. And I'm happy to say that by the time we left China a week later, I felt that you definitely wanted to stay with our group. You seemed...
Really? Like in what way, yeah?
Well, you can tell when children don't want to be handed, not that I attempted to hand you to anyone, but you can get the impression that the child wants to be with you, or with all of us. Rob used to carry you quite a lot as well, because I used to find you quite heavy, obviously. And you definitely, I think, had attached, at least to some extent, to us. And I never felt there was a massive attachment problem once we were home. You definitely wanted to be with me. In social situations, you would sort of stay with me and not run off. You would want to be picked up in busy situations. So I felt there was an attachment that developed quite quickly. But that month, I thought it was unforgivable, but by the time I found out about it, there was nothing I could do. It had happened. You just had to hope that it wasn't too damaging. I just think, did the department in Beijing not know anything about child development? If I knew as an amateur member of the public, did they not have child development experts who told them you cannot do that? I think it changed quite quickly, because by the time I got Ching Ching, she was handed directly to me on the same day from the foster mother, although I never met the foster mother. So by then, perhaps it wasn't happening quite so much. Similarly, you were very lucky to have a foster mother, even though we never met her, because I think only about 1 in 5 of your generation was with individual foster mothers.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know where I got the figure from, but I think I worked it out from people I knew at the time. It was rare. You were one of very few in our circles, our adoption circles in Britain, that I knew had been fostered. And certainly it was borne out by your very healthy, chubby, alert condition, and the fact that you could do lots of things. And a lot of the children we knew who'd been in institutions were much less developed, much less capable of doing stuff for themselves, much less healthy, really. They weren't underfed, well, most of them weren't, or anything like that, but you could see that they hadn't been given the same amount of care as you. So I do believe you were fostered for that reason. Oh yeah, food. So we took you to we were hungry, we took you to the restaurant and asked them what could they find for a baby, because we had no idea what... I had milk with us, we could make up baby milk, but you were obviously looking as though you wanted some solid food as well. So we thought Chinese food is obviously what to get. And they were very good. They knew exactly, is it congee and then some rice, and they knew exactly what children liked. So we found some food for you. And there was this lovely little little girl, I was going to say, I don't know, she must have been 18, I suppose, probably, not much older than that, who was serving, and she spoke reasonable English because it was a Western hotel, I suppose. She'd had to learn it. She was a Chinese girl. And she really played with you and talked to you and spoke to you in Chinese. And then I remember on one occasion, on day 2 or 3, she turned to me and said, "Oh no, of course she won't speak Chinese, she'll just speak English. Oh dear," she seemed quite sad about it. And so I said to her, "No, I will arrange for her to learn Chinese. I'm definitely planning to do that. So she will speak Chinese." And having promised her that sort of stuck with me afterwards. I mean, I had planned to do it anyway, but I always remembered her. And I hate to break my word on anything. So I'm really glad that of the two of you, you're the one who has learned Chinese, because I feel as though it did work out and I was able to fulfill the promise to her, whereas had it been Ching, I would have felt that I'd tried but failed.
But when she was talking to me, was it visible that I could understand?
I think so, yeah. Well, certainly even when we got home, and I took you to the Chinese centre, they spoke to you in Mandarin and you did understand. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing was, we thought you couldn't sort of walk and stand, because that had never appeared to be the case, and it hadn't been mentioned to us by the woman and the other people there. And then we were in the restaurant the first time, and I think Vivian was sort of dandling you around, and then she sort of put you on the floor, and then she gradually took her hands away and said, "Look," she was just holding on one hand, I think. "There she is, she's standing." And we didn't know whether you could do that. And so then, as long as we gave you a finger to hold on to, you were toddling up and down in the restaurant. And so after that, we always gave you opportunities to walk. Just needed a finger to hold on to. But you very soon let go of that. When we got home, you started walking freely. So yeah, there were a lot of developments. It's having to get used to a child, it's quite difficult. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was used to children, but you go back to the hotel room and you think, what do I do now? So I got out a little board book. We've got a film of it, haven't we?
Yeah.
A little book, I can't remember what it was, just some silly little children's book that Douglas had passed on. And so I was reading to you from that. And I remember saying on the film, "Oh dear, I'm going to take a lot of stick for this. I've only had you for 2 hours and I'm already reading a book to you." But I just didn't know what else to do. You were too small, really, to play any other constructive games. And there's a limit to, you didn't understand the same language or anything. So I just thought, I'll do what feels natural. So I read this book, and you were quite interested. And then there were various other people in the hotel, mostly Chinese, hardly any Westerners or English speakers at all. I think we did bump into one man or a couple of men who were in the restaurant. Sometimes there were business people around. And I know one of them was saying that people used to look at you and go, "Oh, she's very bright, look at those eyes, she's very intelligent."
In English, do you?
Well, the ones who spoke English, yes. People were always commenting because you were very alert and very interested in everything. You really were. That's why I always say you were very watchful. You seem to be taking everything in. So then it was a very hot day, but we thought we'd better go out. So I told you we took the pushchair out and walked round. And then the guide offers us various trips, and I'd specifically requested him, because the people who delivered you had said the foster family were in a farming area outside the city. And that was specifically said at the time. It turns out later, doesn't it, to be true that was the area where there were lots of foster mothers. So I asked the guide if he could take us out into the country so we could see and take films and pictures of farming areas, the sort of area where you would have been fostered, for future reference. And that's why we've got a film of water buffalo and chickens. And I don't know whether we took a photo inside, but we went inside one of those farmhouses that had a packed mud floor. I mean, it was like lino almost, really, but it was a mud floor. The sort of thing you'd have had in England centuries ago, but which you never see now. Very nice, friendly family let us go in. I thought it was very kind of them. And we sort of walked around and took photos of the fields. And even about 8 years later, when we came back, the farming areas over that part of China were largely being farmed by hand with only the help of buffalo. Very rarely did you see a tractor. I mean, it is amazing, isn't it? Because tractors have been around in the whole of my life in British farmland, but not there. So I was really glad that I took those photos, and we got pictures of me carrying you around on my hip all the way around these chickens running around our feet and all this stuff. So I thought, well, I ought to take that into account and make sure I get that. And then another trip we went to, is it Mr. Bao, the name of the poet? Yeah, we went to Mr. Bao's house, this famous poet, and it was beautiful, wasn't it? With the parts of Hefei are beautiful, lots of water and old temples and things like that. And this was like an old house from this famous man. So I'm trying to think whether there were any other outings that we did. We weren't there for long, really. We just had to wait for your papers to be processed, including your Chinese passport, so that you could come back to Britain.
So again, this was all sorted out by the guide?
Yeah, but then the female director of the orphanage, and the woman that had brought you to me came to our hotel, and we've got a photo of that too.
Oh.
To deliver copies of your birth certificate, adoption certificate. There's another certificate, I can't think what that was. I thought there were 3 things, and your passport. So they came to the room 2 or 3 days later to say goodbye to you and to give us all that stuff. Then we flew back to Beijing, and again, more paperwork to be done there, different guide, and a female guide, I think, for that one. And she was lovely, but she didn't speak much English. But she was okay, because all we really needed to do, apart from a few trips out, was to take your passport and papers to the British Embassy in Beijing and get a visa for you to enter the country. And they were used to that. There were adoptions going through on a regular basis. So that was all fairly straightforward. We dropped our stuff in, and did we come back, or did they do it on the day? I really can't remember. Isn't it awful? I can't remember whether they did it on that day or whether the guide had to go and collect it or we had to go and collect it. I think we only went there once. So maybe we did wait and they just did it on the day. So then we had permission for you to fly back with me, and we did visits. So what visits did I do with you? I think we did.
So at this point, it's still you and your sister, you and Vivian.
Oh, and yeah, when we got to the hotel in Beijing, Rob, my brother-in-law, and Douglas, my nephew, your cousin, who at the time was 3, turned up. Again, they had the benefit of cheap flights. It's not that we're rich and they just came out for a few days. It's that they got very cheap flights. So they came and joined us, which was really nice. One of the things that had impressed me on one of the lectures I'd been to had been someone who adopted their 3rd child but had had 2 earlier and obviously older birth children. And she said, I was really glad that I took my 2 older children to adopt number 3, because that means that even when I and my husband have gone, there'll always be someone of our own generation who was there from the start. And so I was really quite keen, if possible, for Douglas to be there, because he's your generation. So that was really nice. He was really excited, but he thought you were a boy. It's amazing, isn't it? You had short, boyish haircut, and he kept sort of saying he, and we kept saying, no, she, he. And then I thought, well, it might help if he watched me changing a nappy. He might get the general idea that this was a girl. So he watched me change a nappy, and he still called you he. But the moment he decided to call you she was when he saw you in a dress. That convinced... He came in, I put you in a dress on the final day to see if that would work. He walked in and said, oh, it is a girl. He literally said that. And after that, it was she. You know, changing the nappy didn't do the trick, but the dress did. So Rob, of course, was the tower of strength, because Vivian and I were exhausted, emotionally exhausted by the whole thing. And he was a tower of strength, carrying you around when I got tired, arranging everything as far as he could, looking after Douglas himself. So when we got back to Beijing, of course, for the first time, I was looking after you in the room on my own, because Vivian was in the room with her husband and son. And just for a moment you think, oh, I'm on my own. And you think, well, this is how it's going to be, so get over it. It was fine. I had to just keep mixing up this wretched milk and, you know, everything. Oh, and on that trip, everyone said sterilise everything. When you were over a year old, you were used to China. I'm sure the foster mother wasn't sterilising anything, or the orphanage. I was sterilising. It was ridiculous. I didn't bother the next time. I remember when I adopted Ching Ching, everyone else was sterilising. I was going, nah, don't bother. There was no point. It was really completely over the top. In a nice, clean hotel room, why would you? I used pre-boiled water for the milk, and that was it really. That's all you needed. Anyway, so I made up all these bottles and did all this stuff, and then I really was a bag of nerves, but I think everybody is in that situation. It's not just that I am a naturally nervous person. I think every mother in that situation is a bag of nerves. They really are. It really is very stressful. But we did enjoy, as far as possible, the trips. We took you to the Summer Palace outside Beijing to the Forbidden City in Beijing and to the Great Wall.
Oh, I haven't seen pictures of me that young on the Great Wall.
I don't know, there must be pictures somewhere. Yeah.
We'll find them for those who are watching on YouTube.
And then, of course, we flew home, and that in itself was really hard. I mean, it's about a 10-hour flight, isn't it? And I don't think you slept much.
Did I cry?
Not much, no, but I mean, it was a very busy flight. I was separated from all the others. I was sitting on my own in a very busy part of the tourist cabin. At one point, the man on the other side of the aisle very kindly said, "Give her to me while you have a meal," because I was going to have to turn down a meal. You know how hungry I get if I haven't been eating. And he saw that I was saying, "I don't think I can have a meal because she's on my lap," and he said, "Give it to me." So he took her. It was such a relief. I was so hungry. So you were just literally sitting next door. You were okay with that. And I had food with me for you. And then we got home and Grandma and Jack met us at the airport. That's my parents. And they were delighted with you, obviously, because they weren't knackered and hadn't been on a flight. So they took us back to the house. And then I really was on my own, at home, on my own. That was it. With jet lag.
How did you feel?
Well, just exhausted, but obviously relieved. Very relieved to be back on familiar territory. Because it had all been very... It's the first time in my life I've been on a foreign trip and really wanted to be at home. I wanted to get back. It just felt much more secure once I was back without having to try and deal with everything in hotel rooms and everything. I was really glad to get back.
So you say that you felt embarrassed when the tour guide first mentioned, your daughter. Yeah, when would you say you felt as though I was your child then? You talk more about, because I guess it's more complex, A, being, as you say, a single parent and never thinking you could have children, but then B, that you are adopting internationally. So I know some adopted parents might go and immediately think, oh, this is my child.
They did, a lot of them did.
Yeah, well, yeah, to talk more about that, and then how you said, as you say, you felt embarrassed. So when would you say, yeah, you felt as though I was your child?
It's a very gradual process for me. Some people, as you said, are in there, bang, that's it, she's mine, sort of thing. They fell in love with them at first sight. That's lovely, but my reaction to that is sort of, well, good job you didn't fall in love with someone else's baby, isn't it? If it happens bang, like that. Because I don't have any inner feeling that it's designed by anyone else, like God or fate, or... I think I don't have any feeling that it was all meant to be. I feel that it was organised and not in any way an inevitability. So it took time for me. I'm sure it's so true of others, but not all. I got more and more familiar with you. We felt more comfortable with each other. I became attached to you, but it probably took months. Yeah.
Yeah, because I find it interesting how, even now when I talk to my mum about those very, very early days when I was adopted, she always says the baby. She never says, like, you or Xinru. She always just says the baby.
Do I?
Yeah, you're not even aware of it. You just say, oh, the baby. And I'm like, you mean me?
Well, we used to refer to you as the baby. I suppose that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
We used to refer to you as the baby.
Really?
Yeah.
You and what? You
Vivian and I, yeah. We spoke to you by your name, but we probably referred to the baby. I think you'll find lots of people do that with birth children as well. It's the baby, and then gradually it evolves into a name that's used all the time. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And because Ching Ching was the baby, I remember Vivian referring to her as the baby, and she was quite bigger than you were. So she wasn't really a baby at all. Yeah, I think it takes time to attach unless you have decided in advance that you're going to fall in love with them on first sight. And if you've decided that, then it tends to happen. Having said that, maybe for some people it is unexpected. I don't know, but yeah, it took time for me to attach to both of you.
So yeah, you mentioned what you called me by. So yeah, what does one do when you adopt? Did you said you referred to me as the baby, but what did you actually call me?
Called you Xinru, yeah. I listened to try. I mean, of course, I don't say it with the correct Chinese accent. I'm aware of that, but I did listen to see whether it was closest to Xinru or Xinru. And when we were in Hefei, I felt it was more like a soft S, Xinru. It didn't sound like a sh to me.
Yeah, the X sound in Chinese is not a harsh sh, but it's still a kind of softer. Yeah.
Was it prior to pinyin? It was written HS, wasn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
HS.
Yeah. Xinru.
Oh. Okay.
Like s, but not sh. It's not SH, but HS, yeah.
Mm.
You'll see that in old documents about China before pinyin was invented or used. You'll see that HS quite a lot.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Didn't you? I'm sure
no.
I've done.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's what you would have been. Your initial would have been an H in the old notation, I suppose.
Interesting.
Interestingly, with your name, endless discussions before I even left about whether I was going to spell it in, the normal way, pinyin way. I was determined that that's what I was going to do. But loads of people tried to talk me out of it. They said I should, spell it in a way that would be accessible to English people. I suppose now that would be regarded as a bit dodgy on a racial front, wouldn't it? Do you think? To change the spelling into a Western spelling for the convenience of others?
I think unless the child would want that as well.
How would you know?
Well, no, yeah. For nowadays, yeah, how would you know? But as in, when they get older, if they wanted to change it.
Yeah, you never did.
No.
Did you think of it?
No. Yeah, I probably thought about it.
What would you have changed it to?
But I don't want to change it.
No, but what would you have changed it to if you had changed it?
Yeah, I never wanted to though, because I thought, SHIN. I don't want to be using it as a shin, like a shin. No, didn't. Yeah.
I was always determined to stick. I thought, well, that's the way it's on her documents. That's the way it's going to be, and I know it was going to cause difficulty, and everyone mispronounced it, including me, in the sense that I don't do the right intonation, inflection, or whatever it's called. But that can't be helped. I still persevered with it, and within a day or two, I couldn't have imagined you called anything else. It's funny because at first it does feel a bit awkward because it's such a foreign name, but once you use it, you just get so used to it. I could never imagine calling you anything else.
So I'm called by my Chinese name by my family and by really close friends or childhood friends and other Chinese people and other adoptees or just people I was around when I was really young. But then when I moved to school, I used my English name for these reasons. And I was going to say though, because you just said you can't imagine calling me anything else, but you do sometimes call me by my English name when we're around.
Only because I have to.
It
always feels awkward.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does it?
Yes.
Very. Weird. Even though she's the one who gave me my English name.
It does feel awkward, yeah.
Does it?
I have to make myself do it, yeah. It feels very weird. It doesn't feel like your name.
See, that's so interesting because I feel as though my Chinese name, not as much in the past few months, but maybe say a year or two ago, I used to feel as though my Chinese name felt less like my English name. This whole identity with names. It's a really, really interesting discussion, I think. Well,
you can be both, can't you?
No, you can be both, but then when I was growing up, I'd say from childhood to say 18, I felt the names were very equal because at home, where I was half the time, I'd hear my Chinese name from my family, and the rest of the time with my friends and at school, my English name. And then as I went to university, I heard my Chinese name less and less and less because I was never at home. And when I was at home or when I spoke to mum on the phone, you don't necessarily address me by my name on the phone. And so at university, all I'd hear is Viola. So I felt less and less attached to my Chinese name and I felt less like my Chinese name. And I got really sad by that because I thought, I don't really hear it that much. When I did hear it, it felt less like me because I was so used to hearing Viola and, in my emails and everything at university, it was always Viola and everything. And then, I got really got quite sad actually about that. And I guess in lockdown I was back here with Mum and Ching Ching and I heard it again all the time.
You said that to me at the time and that's why I said, why didn't you take... In babyhood, one of my friends had carved some wooden blocks with her name in Chinese letters, the 5 letters all carved out. I said, why didn't you take that back with you? Do you remember you put it on the mantelpiece?
Put it on the mantelpiece in my second year, yeah.
So she had Chinese name.
My Chinese name there. Yeah, but I felt that and I think Ching Ching maybe to an extent, not really sure, but felt something similar maybe. But yeah, I felt like... Yeah, I was really sad. I felt like I was losing that part of my name and my identity because I wasn't hearing it as much. And actually within the past year, I've got my closest friends who weren't with me in childhood, friends I'd made at school and at university, to start calling me by my Chinese name instead because I felt as though...
do it before?
Yeah, because I really wanted to hear it more often. I felt as though I'm not going to hear it as much because at the moment it's only family, really, and a couple of friends who I don't really see that often, from childhood. So I really felt sad. I thought, no, I want to hear it more. I want people to call me it more. So I got my closest friends to start calling me it. Because now, interestingly, my Chinese name, because I only used it for family and childhood friends, in a way, because there was a stage when I got to university and I thought, oh, okay, I'm starting university. I could start using my Chinese name, and then I decided against it. When I finished university and I was entering the professional world, I thought, I could switch now and use my Chinese name. But then I was having this discussion with Chin recently, and we both decided that while we could do those and change and use our Chinese names in the professional world, we both realised that in this time where we didn't really use our Chinese names, our Chinese names became like more sacred and more special to us, and we only wanted to give certain people that privilege of calling us that name, because for someone to use that name for us, we felt like we really, really trusted those people, and we wanted only a select group to call us by our Chinese name, and it just became a lot more special. So actually, now it's only people that I would like to call me my Chinese name that I kind of allow, rather than it be a given. I don't introduce myself with my Chinese name anymore, really.
Except that when you go to China, I suppose you will.
Oh, except when I go to China, ever since I've gone to China, I always use my Chinese name because it makes sense, because it is my Chinese name.
It is a proper Chinese name,
Yeah, whereas, when I introduce myself to new people I meet here, I wouldn't use my Chinese name. Although, when I meet Chinese people or Chinese-speaking people here in England or in Lisbon, I would still introduce myself as Viola, but I'd also say, but I have a Chinese name which you can call me if you want. I think because I feel more comfortable, if they already speak Chinese, calling me a Chinese name.
Yeah.
Whereas, even with people I meet now, I don't introduce myself with my Chinese name, because, it's kind of like I want a select few to call me that. So, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's all worked out reasonably well on the names front, because it was a difficult decision to what to do with any of it, really. Yeah.
That wraps up this episode then, and in the next episode we'll talk about what it was like for me settling down in England, being in a completely unfamiliar country, surrounded by very unfamiliar people, and broaching all the kind of issues that can arise from that.
Okay, thank you for listening. See you at the next episode. Bye.
Bye.